Okay, I'm back to talk about the Monaco Grand Prix, and as you can see, I'm playing as a Daniel Ricciardo of like 3 years ago, which is wholly appropriate because he drove an absolute blinder on Sunday. Why do I have to guess it was always on Sundays? But let's start with Ricciardo then, seeing as he's basically the entire story of the race. Fastest on Thursday, then on Saturday he was absolutely brilliant. The in Q2 to use the super soft rather than the ultra soft and still get through. Didn't look in doubt in the end because he was a long way ahead of a lot of people. But Mercedes didn't try that; they weren't brave enough to do that, and that would have given him in a dry race a very good chance of pulling off something fairly special, especially with the very short run down to the first corner. Uh, but then in Q3 he drove probably an even better lap. I don't quite know how he did it. Monaco. It's one of those courses. All of it's hard, but certainly the last sector is the most. This is an inappropriate thing to say, but balls to the wall sector. That's where you gotta really trust your car, but trust yourself as well. Uh, because most of the corners happen to coincide with big walls. Uh, you know, so he was fastest of all, especially in that last sector. Put it on pole, first of his career. Very well done. Now, some will say there was, the tinfoil hat brigade came out again and tried to make it so that Lewis Hamilton was robbed of pole, which I don't really buy. He had a fuel pressure issue and missed the first run in Q3, but then he got out. He had a chance to do a bunch of laps. He pulled out of his first flying lap, and then his second flying lap, he was quick for the first two sectors, which makes sense because he's probably the fastest car. And now, I would really be fascinated to know, because if this is the case, that that maybe he didn't actually have the fuel or the tyres to get to the end on that lap, and that if he hadn't have had to do a 4 lap stint and he only had to do a 1 lap stint like everybody else, that he would have been fine. But Mercedes didn't say that. No one has made this allegation. I'm just sort of guessing at a hypothetical situation that could have happened. But alternatively, he could have just been slower than Ricciardo in that section, which seems to be the way it was, and slower than Rosberg as well, and was in third place. So he got a flying lap in. His flying lap was not as fast as the others. Now, again, it would have been nice if he got 2, but he didn't, and I don't think that he was going to be faster than Ricciardo anyway, because as I said in Q2, Ricciardo was only 3/10 slower on half to 3/4 of a second slower tyres. I don't think that he would have somehow not been able to pull out that gap. It went on the ultra softs. Anyway, that's all I really want to say about qualifying. Again, Monaco sort of hides the frailties of an engine because Toro Rosso and McLaren were alright. And in the race, again, that turned out very well in Fernando Alonso's favour, as he got a very, very high finish. But as for the race itself, try to be quick today, because I say quick, I'll probably be stupidly slow, but I don't want to waste time talking about stuff because unfortunately it was one of those races where a lot happened at the front, but not very much happened the rest of the way down. It was too wet to start, and maybe I just don't have enough things to do with my life, but I don't like a safety car start, especially because it was a safety car start for 7 laps. I'd much rather see a racing start. If we can't get a racing start, I'd much rather a rolling start, but start on lap 1 and get a full race distance of racing. I can understand having to use a safety car mid-race because you've already started and you've got you're using all the fuel and you're doing all the important stuff. But I just think you don't need it for the start. I get like the safety thing is fine. You know, maybe you don't want everyone doing a standing start because it might end disastrously. But don't start a race that you don't believe you can actually race in. That's all I want. You know, they could have waited 10 minutes, maybe a bit longer, and then had a perfectly normal start and just gone for it and seen what happens. And that would have been perfectly fine. Okay, well, the race would have ended at 10 past 2 rather than at 2. Oh, not 2, 3 even. That's not the end of the world. But as it was, that start certainly helped Ricciardo. It got him away, no problems. And then when it started again, he promptly just sort of zoomed off down. He clearly was much better, and this came to light for the rest of the race. Every time there's a virtual safety car, he's clearly a much more, not necessarily him, but his car itself was clearly much better at getting the tyres into gear. That's probably mixing metaphors there a bit too much. You know, he got the car activated and it moved much faster than everybody else's, which gave him a huge advantage over the Mercedes behind him. Hamilton caught behind Rosberg. Rosberg very, very slow, and this is, you know, apparently he had brake temperature issues. I find that a bit dubious because, you know, it would have been too cold, and the best solution to cold brakes is driving faster. So, you know, if you're a second, I can understand, okay, yeah, you lose confidence in the ability to brake, and then you have to slow down. But this is a guy that's won Monaco 3 times. He should know where the limit is around there, and he should have tried to drive to it. Maybe I'm being too harsh, but that's what I think on them. So I think Mercedes did the right thing to let Hamilton pass, because it would have completely ruined his race if he'd been stuck behind him all day long. But I don't buy. This is the second time of the weekend I don't buy what Hamilton was saying. I don't buy that he was just about to pass Rosberg anyway. You know, you don't just about to pass a guy at Monaco. You know, there wasn't. I don't think a passing. Especially at turn 3. You're not passing around turn 3. I'm sorry. I know Lewis thinks that he can pass anyone anywhere, but you don't spend 10 laps stuck behind someone and then suddenly pull around in front of them when you were much faster than them all along. So I don't buy that. But then once Lewis was sort of set free, we had a race on our hands. Sort of. I don't think under, you know, if they'd all run the same strategy, I don't think at any point in the race, or any point in the weekend really, he was going to beat Ricciardo in pure speed. Like, I think he caught Ricciardo a little bit, but then once Ricciardo knew that there was someone chasing him, the gap seemed to sort of level out. And then when Ricciardo changed onto inters, he made up the pit stop time very, very quickly, which, yeah, I guess that's what happens when you're on dry tyres. Now, I'm probably getting ahead of myself here, but I don't think going on to inters in hindsight was the right thing to do. And this goes back to sort of my general philosophy on racing, which is if you've got the fastest car, which by being on pole and being faster in practice, Ricciardo did have the fastest car. You know, he may not think it, but that was the case. You do not have to change anything. You just do the exact strategy that the guy that you're racing is doing, and you should finish ahead of him. As for changing on to inters at that time, it looked like the right decision to make, but for some reason Pirelli have managed to finally make it so that the wet tyres are raceable, and Lewis Hamilton just took advantage of that. You know, he kept his track position. He wasn't hideously slow. He didn't really bring anybody else into the race other than Ricciardo, which is a good sign for me. And I'm doing terribly on this game today, so I don't know what's going on. But you know, he wasn't too slow. Ricciardo caught him, but couldn't pass him, which again shows he was driving at sort of a relatively okay pace. And that basically bought him a pit stop. You know, he didn't have to, Ricciardo made a change he didn't have to do. He gave him track position on a track where you can't pass, and he never gave it up. And then obviously there was the incident with the pit stop for slicks. Again, if we're talking about hindsight, Red Bull's problem was they brought out the soft tyres rather than the super softs. They should have just put the softs on rather than spend 12 seconds fiddling around, because the softs were great in the race. You see Perez and Vettel, they went onto softs and they were perfectly fine. If anything, they're probably faster than the other tyres. And also by doing that, it would have given some reassurance that there was no issue regarding tyre wear, and that might have made Ricciardo more comfortable pushing. But again, sort of hindsight, it doesn't really matter. The major issue obviously was that's the second time in a row that poor pit strategy and in the end poor pit execution has cost Ricciardo a race. He would have been about 8 seconds in front. I think if we had a normal stop, he would have been 8 to 10 seconds ahead of Hamilton on the road. Such was his speed of in lap. That, for me, that would have been a slam dunk, and I don't think Hamilton had the pace to catch him and then pass him on track all weekend. I think he would have actually sort of broken away eventually. So, it must be devastatingly disappointing. I rate Ricciardo as probably the best driver on the grid, but not necessarily have enough evidence to back that up. Because what real champion drivers do is they win every single week, and he's got 3 wins in 3 years in a moderately good car. But he's certainly the best since Kubica for us as far as drivers in non-championship cars go. How he'll fare if Red Bull managed to produce a car that is at the front. It's been in the front 2 weeks in a row now, but if it's at the front an entire season and they're challenging for the championship, if he can become someone who wins every single week, which is what the Vettels and the Alonsos and in the past the Schumachers and the Sennas and the Prosts of the world did, then I think he'll be more than capable of matching any of those guys' achievements. But we don't know yet, because that's a different kind of pressure and a different kind of racing. But I'd be devastatingly disappointed if I was him. Lewis Hamilton drove as good a race, I think, as he could. Now, I would dispute the defensive manoeuvre he pulled on just after the pit stops. The defensive manoeuvre he pulled on Ricciardo, I do not believe was fair. I think he definitely gained an advantage by cutting the chicane. Running him off the road, I don't know, because it wasn't in a braking zone, and Ricciardo didn't crash. I don't think he was ahead of him, but so I don't think he rammed him into a wall. But I do think when you look at all the complaining last week, obviously it wasn't him, but his fans and the media made, he was guilty of exactly what they were accusing Rosberg of doing the previous week. And I think he definitely cut a corner, and that's simply not fair on the guy behind him. You're allowed. People say you're allowed one cut corner, if you're on your own and it's just a tight amount of gaining time. Don't worry about it. If you do it over and over again, then you get penalised. But if you cut a corner to defend a position, which is what he did, that should be a slam dunk. Give the place back, or you'll get a penalty. So I'm not really sure what the FIA were doing. But other than that, he made those wet tyres last. Very well done. And then he put himself in a position. It'd be very easy to, when under pressure from someone who's driving faster all weekend and is capable of passing if given a shot, like Ricciardo is, it will be very, very easy to turn around and hit a wall. You see what Verstappen and Raikkonen and other drivers that I can't think of, but plenty of people were hitting walls, and Hamilton was certainly under enough pressure that sort of thing could happen. He didn't do it, so he held on. He was in first place. He took, if you want to put the cliches, you've got to finish first, and you the chance was given to him and he took it, and that's all you can ask from him. So well done. I don't think he was the fastest this weekend. I think in normal conditions, Ricciardo would have beaten him on any other track in the world. I think Ricciardo would have passed him. But it wasn't any other track in the world. It's Monaco, and Hamilton had a very similar pit stop problem last year that cost him the race. So I'm not overly at issue with him winning. In third place, Perez does that thing where his tyres last forever and ever and ever. Well done. I've got a lot of admiration for Perez. I know some people think he's boring. Some people think maybe he's not as good as his teammate. The truth is, every time there's a sort of mixed up race, and there's a chance for Force India to get a result, it's almost invariably Perez that gets that result. And if that's going to be the case, then he's a very good driver. Because again, if we go to the, I said for Hamilton, you get the chance and you take it. Perez seems to often take the chance to win races, but to get on the podium when others slip up. So, I was impressed by that. Vettel, mixed weekend. Not, fourth in normal conditions was probably the best he could do, but the fact that it was a Force India in front of him, probably very upsetting. To have when Nico Rosberg is 3 places behind you, you should be first. That's really the rules. That should be you've won the race. So I think he'll be disappointed that somebody else, or even 2 non-Mercedes, finished ahead of him. I think that's a bad race. I'm not sure Ferrari had the pace this weekend. Raikkonen looked all over the place. But I just think Vettel probably rates himself much more highly than the performance he gave. Alonso was behind him. Alonso did very, very, very well. Again, the strategy sort of played out in his favour, but he made it work. Hulkenberg, similar story. How he got ahead of Rosberg at the end, I don't know. I think Nico Rosberg is going to be very, very upset about how his weekend went, because as I said, he won it 3 times in a row. He's leading the championship. This is the first time this season he's finished a race and not won it. I think in those circumstances you'd be bitterly disappointed. As for anyone else, Kvyat, his head's in the wrong place. I think he needs a break. I don't think driving for Toro Rosso is doing him any favours right now, because I think he's just, he did really well in qualifying and then he just went mental during the race, and that's not good for you. And the the Sauber boys, don't hit each other. You have nothing to gain from doing that. You were racing for last. The thing I would want most from a driver in a backmarker team, if you want to find yourself in the sport next year, or you want to find yourself in the sport under your own steam rather than under big sponsorship monies, prove yourself as somebody who doesn't get into tangles with their teammate for last place. Give everyone a wide berth. If you're racing for 10th, go as hard as you like. I want people to fight for points. I want people to fight all the time, but Sauber do not need to be rebuilding 2 cars. So I just think this is not. I think in the olden days, especially when reliability wasn't so good, when teams were a lot poorer, or there were more poor teams, the idea of a driver that just didn't crash was very bankable. And I think someone like Marcus Ericsson, who has shown very little pace in his career so far, I can't think of any real suggestions that he'd be particularly quick, could at least try and make himself reliable. That would seem like something you could teach yourself. It's not going well for him. And the last thing I want to say is I don't think Jolyon Palmer's going to last very long in this sport. He's been comprehensively outraced by Kevin Magnussen, which shouldn't be surprising. Magnussen's a very good driver. Palmer's a rookie. But I just think the temptation of Esteban Ocon, a Frenchman in a Renault, will be too much for them. And if when your current driver is fairly underwhelming, and there's not very many qualities to him that, you know, they're not very marketable. Doesn't look like he's going to turn around and win everything. There's no suggestion, you know, especially in the British media, you'd think they'd hype him up more. They don't seem to particularly warm to him very much. So I just don't think he's going to go very far. And I think Renault would be mad not to give Ocon a drive, partly because he's very good, and partly because he's very French. And that's really going to help you in there. At least for trying their own personal brand, if not looking for sponsors outside. I think that they'll benefit from that. Maybe it sounds a bit jingoistic, but that's how I feel about it. I think I'm going to stop there. So, Montreal in a couple of weeks. Always a good race. Should be fun. Certainly with the new 3-tyre strategy, I think that'll make it a bit spicier. And I'd like to see what kind of legs this Red Bull or the Renault engine has, because I think Red Bull could go very well there. You know, they're very good in the slow corners, we've seen that. If the engine doesn't even have to be the fastest engine, it just has to be within touching distance to, you know, if they can get in a situation where down the straight with the RS they could get side by side with the Mercedes, then we've got a race on our hands. And that's all I think most fans just would like to see, is a situation where Mercedes aren't racing each other but are racing another team. Because as much as racing each other is fun, it sometimes gets a bit repetitive, especially if you've got a situation like this year at least, where one person other than this weekend had been very dominant, let's say. So anyway, I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.